All right, Geaux Rouge. This is Franz Borghardt with Liz from the Baton Rouge Area Chamber for our weekly time with BRAC to discuss a little bit about what's going on in the greater Baton Rouge area with business and COVID-19. If you've been keeping track of this, sometimes we get Liz, sometimes we get Adam. Don't tell Adam, Liz, we like you better. So Liz is going to help us with some updates on what's going on. She's going to talk about some of the wonderful resources that the Baton Rouge Area Chamber have at your disposal for free. And we're going to talk a little bit about basically what happened yesterday with the executive order. Liz, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Franz. How about you?
So if you notice, I'm a little bronzer than normal. I was outside for about an hour. I attended the motorcade downtown for the fallen officer.
Yeah.
Really touching. My son was out there. So it's been an emotional day, but otherwise pretty good. And speaking of emotional days, yesterday, I was one of the many business owners that watched the governor's press conference and noticed that the governor has extended it for 2 more weeks. So
Yes.
let's jump in. Let's jump in there first. Can you talk a little bit about what that means?
Well, it means a few things, right? I mean, it means our economy is not going to start getting right back to reopening. And I know that business owners and just people across Louisiana are really disappointed about that. But it also came with a little bit of loosening up of a few things. It also came with some clarifications that I think were really important and that I hope business owners were really paying attention to. So, we saw some loosening of the order in a couple of ways. One, mall stores can be open now for curbside delivery, right? So malls had been closed under the first order unless they had an outside entrance, those stores. But now, you can buy things from a store in the mall. You just have to drive up to the curb and pick them up there. The other big thing is that restaurants are now allowed to use any outdoor spaces that they may have. In order to allow folks to go and just eat on a patio, if you will. So it's still within the limitations that were in the original order. You have to have 10 or fewer people there, and you can't have tableside service, but you can go, you can pick up your food, you could sit down on a patio, with your loved one, and you can sit down and enjoy your food. And so we're trying to see locally if we can do some things to make that a little bit easier for some restaurants who may not have an outdoor space. If there's a way for restaurants to take advantage of sidewalk space or something like that, to enable them to potentially bring in a few more customers right now, utilizing the loosening in that order. The other thing that I think is important that was clarified by the governor is that not as many businesses are closed as many people were believing.
Did you notice?
That's a
Did you
big
notice
thing.
that?
Yes, in
Yeah,
fact. Yeah.
it was very. It wasn't subtle at all. In fact, so
No.
talk a little bit about that distinction.
Yeah. So, this is something we've been talking about at BRAC for a few weeks. We've put out a few pieces on this in our analysis of the CISA guidelines. So that's the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Administration, which has put out all that guidance about what is an essential industry and what is not an essential industry. And so in our analysis, we've made the point that, look, there's a group of industries that are essential, and something like 48% of people in the capital region work in an essential industry. And then there's a group of industries that were explicitly closed by the governor's original order, things like salons, like
Right.
before mall stores, right, that were closed, just bar none. But then there's a lot of folks who are in that gray area, and nothing is talking about whether they are open or closed. And the governor yesterday made clear they're not closed. They are allowed to be open. They do have to operate within that standard of 10 or fewer people. And we do want them to try and make sure that they're not, unnecessarily engaging with the public, but make sales. Absolutely. And so those stores are open. And that's something that, we're glad to see being elevated on a statewide stage. We're glad to hear the governor clarifying that. And we hope that business owners are taking that into account.
So changing gears a little bit
Sure.
to PPP SBA loans.
Yeah.
It's my understanding there's a second round or stream of funding coming out. Can you talk a little bit about that? The biggest question I've been getting is, well, if there's a second round, that's my term, not the government's term, but if there's a second round, is there priority for people that were in the queue before versus not in the queue? Do they have to reapply? So talk a little bit about that.
So that is going to be entirely based on folks' lender in terms of their
Okay.
place in the queue. So when Congress went ahead and they refunded, if you will, the PPP and the EIDL loans and all the other federal provisions that were under the CARES Act, they put an additional $310 billion into the PPP, right? So we're talking about the original funding was $349 billion. Now we're adding another $310 billion. This is a lot of money here we're talking about. And they did that last week, but the applications didn't actually open until yesterday. They opened at 9:30 here in Louisiana, 9:30 a.m. And we actually got quite a few calls over at BRAC yesterday from folks who were telling us that, they had gotten in touch with their bank and their bank wasn't going to be processing PPP applications yesterday. And so what we're finding out is that the banks needed a little bit of time to catch up because of precisely what you said. There were so many folks who had submitted an application to their lender, but the SBA wasn't accepting those applications when there wasn't any money. So, you just had all of these applications that were kind of sitting in purgatory. And so the banks were taking that opportunity yesterday, not all of them, but some of them, while the SBA was opening back up that portal to get those applications processed. And then have started now taking new applications. So actually, just before I hopped on with you, I got an update from my team, and 52 billion of the 310 billion allocation has already been claimed. If you'll remember from the last time we talked, the burn rate was around $30 billion a day. And so now we're at 52 billion for just one day's worth of appropriations.
And theoretically, and again, I'm not an economics guy, but theoretically, the more people that get the loans, it's going to open. I mean, I know this is going to sound kind of wonky, but essentially, we should get to a point where people that needed the loans have applied for the loans, and it's not like you can reapply for the loans if you've already gotten the loans. So, do we project? I know you may not be able to answer this. Do we project that this is going to be enough? Or are we probably going to have to go back to the well with Congress? What do you think?
We haven't done an analysis to say whether or not we're going to be able to meet the needs of everybody. You're right that you can only apply for one PPP loan. And there has been some advice that's been out there telling people to apply for as much as you can. It's a $10 million cap. So apply for the 10 million, there's no payment for pre-penalty. You can turn that unused money right back over, and it's a 1% interest rate. So you can get that money right back to the government. But I don't know that we can say that it's going to be enough, right? This is a massive, massive disaster that we just have never seen before in our current kind of infrastructure that we have. And so I don't know that we've projected that for Louisiana. I think the last time that I checked on the PPP, Louisiana businesses had accessed $33 billion thereabouts. We'll see soon, I'm sure, what the Louisiana numbers look like now that there's this second tranche.
Okay. Anything else we need to know about SBA loans and or SBA PPP loans before we kind of change gears a little bit?
I meant to check before I hopped on with you, but this morning when I got to my desk before the sun got up, I checked on the SBA's website on the economic injury disaster loan, which was also refunded by this new legislation from last week. And they had not reopened the application for that EIDL EIDL loan. So we do anticipate that will come. I'm trying to think, there was $50 billion that was refunded into that EIDL loan amount, and then another $10 billion for those EIDL advances, which are the up to $10,000 grants that you can get from the SBA. But that application has not opened back up yet. It is unfortunate because the SBA just has a message up on their site that says, due to lack of funding, we don't have the application open, but there's no date on it. So if you aren't aware of what's going on, you may think that there's actually no money there and give up. Don't give up. They just haven't reopened that application yet.
So it goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. We've got people watching on Facebook Live on the Geaux Rouge page. Again, if you're tuning in, you got Liz from BRAC and myself, Franz Borghardt from Geaux Rouge. We are talking things business as it relates to what's going on with COVID-19. If you've got a question, if you have a question, feel free to put it in the thread. The reason I keep looking down, Liz, is I'm looking at the thread to make sure there's no questions. And I'll try to give it to Liz. Please keep your questions related kind of to what we're talking about. The goal is not to stop Liz. The goal is to get answers that could help you and your business. Okay, so we've covered loans. We've covered the amended order. Let's go to the dashboard. Anything new on the BRAC dashboard that we need to talk about?
I don't know that there's necessarily anything new on the BRAC dashboard, but I will say that it's kind of reiterated what we've been seeing. Price of oil is not looking good. That's going to have huge ramifications on our state budget. It's going to have huge ramifications on our driver industries. Unemployment continues apace. It's a little bit better than things were the week before, but unemployment numbers are still just astronomically higher than they have ever been. And, I think that's why we were all really just so disappointed that we're not going to be able to start looking at a phased reopening of the economy. Things are bad, and the end is not in sight. I think we were all really hoping that the end would be coming, and some hope that we could get back to business.
So for those who don't know, what are the resources that are available on the BRAC webpage for citizens that are just trying to keep an eye on what's going on?
Yeah, so we've got a lot going on. We've got webinars that are happening every week. This week we have already had 2 webinars. Today is Tuesday. We've already had 2 webinars. We had Congressman Cedric Richmond this morning to talk about the refunding of the CARES Act and to answer questions for folks. Tomorrow, Neil Bradley from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is going to be joining us. He heads up all of their public policy initiatives. And he's going to be talking about the U.S. Chamber's plan for reopening the U.S. economy. So that's going to be really a not to be missed webinar. We're really excited to have Neil with us. And then later on in the week, we're going to have a couple of doctors joining us, one from, I think, Baton Rouge General and another from the Baton Rouge Clinic, who are going to be talking about health and safety procedures for when you do open up your business. What are the kinds of things that we ought to all be doing in terms of PPE or in terms of enhanced cleaning, things like that. So we've got webinars on the website. Those are all free. You can register. Just go to brac.org/recovery. In addition to that, we've got our weekly indicator dashboard. Thanks for referring to that, Franz. We've been doing that now for a month. And so that is our attempt at putting together some quantitative data about what the economy is looking like. And so we've got unemployment claims there. We've got the impacts on the price of oil, on fuel sales, on the hospitality and tourism industry, and what hotel revenue and hotel occupancy looks like. Lots of information there that's very useful to sort of getting as much of a picture as we can about things that are happening quickly in a quantitative way. We've also got analysis of everything under the sun that is happening related to business on COVID-19. So whether that is the essential industry guidance that I referred to, or it is simplistic breakdowns of the federal small business recovery opportunities, or now that the governor has the Resilient Louisiana Commission looking at what it means to open the economy. And there's the Louisiana legislature has an economic recovery task force that is also looking at legislation that needs to be brought to help reopen the economy and recover from COVID-19. We've got all kinds of analyses and information available there in what we hope are very bite-sized and understandable pieces. And then also finally, we've got our BR Works page. And BR Works is our attempt to try to provide a service to those folks who are seeking employment, or to companies who are having to furlough or lay off, or companies who are hiring. We're providing a bit of a matchmaking service between those companies where skills are transferable for employees that are being either laid off and furloughed, and employees who are being sought. And it's also serving as a job board. So we've had the opportunity to chat with over 200 companies that are looking to hire people and have been able to post those jobs up on our site, which is, again, brac.org/recovery.
So all free resources. You don't have to be an investor, although like I told Adam last week, we of course encourage you to consider being an investor with BRAC.
Thank you.
By the way, Liz, Ashley Greenhouse gives you a shout out on Facebook Live.
Hi, Ashley.
#classmate.
Yep.
So if you're watching on Facebook Live, and I know we have a few, just a reminder, you can ask Liz anything and just shoot a message on there. I'm going to reiterate what we just said, which is, or what I just said, which is you need to go to the BRAC website. There are some wonderful free resources. The only thing you don't get to have access to is Ask Adam sessions, which it is what it is. But there are tons of free resources, which is a testament to how much BRAC cares about the community, the business community. I would encourage you to consider joining as an investor. The webinars in and of itself, I'm very much looking forward to. I try, Liz, as best I can to do little webinars, but you guys are the experts on that. So
We are now. We've had to build that plane as we fly it.
right.
Yeah.
The biggest question I keep getting asked, and Scott Huffstetler from Keen Miller was on for a little bit, but I don't see him anymore. The biggest question I keep getting asked, in fact, I was asked this morning at an East Ascension Rotary meeting I was talking at virtually via Zoom, are employment law questions about the rights of employees, rights of employers. What happens if somebody gets sick? I talked about workers' compensation. Scott brought up to me this morning OSHA requirements and what happens if somebody gets sick at a plant and how that effect has a ripple effect. So one of the things that we're going to try to do, if you're listening out there, is I'm going to try to convince Keen Miller to let Scott come and play with us a little bit. And I will also talk to you guys, Liz, about maybe doing a BRAC employment law-oriented topic webinar so that we can get some of the stakeholders on there, because workers' compensation is the big question I keep getting asked about. I keep getting asked, well, what if my boss is telling me to do something and I don't feel safe doing it? Can I lose my job? And I'm like, well, it's complicated. We're not will employment state, but if you have a contract, I don't know. And so that's certainly going to be something we're touching on. That being said, I've only got you for 13 more minutes, but we don't have to stay the full 13 minutes. Anything else that's going on with BRAC right now that we need to talk about that we haven't talked about already? You guys are doing a tremendous job. Candidly, I've told this to Adam. I told it to you, Liz. You guys are really, really, really making a terrible situation as palpable as it can be from a information and resources standpoint. Anything else we need to talk about before I let you on to your busy day?
Well, you brought up the employment law question. I think it's something that we can talk about a little bit more, right? So we're of course hearing about it from the employer side of it. And we're hearing employers are very concerned about the idea that they might face liability from somebody, a customer coming to their facility, purchasing something, engaging in some kind of business transaction, and in the process, potentially contracting the virus. And what kind of liability that may open them up to. It's something that's very concerning to a lot of businesses. And so, part of that work, I think, with the Louisiana Economic Recovery Task Force that the legislature is running is going to be around what kinds of laws need to be in place so that businesses can reopen and they won't necessarily be liable for as long as they are following recommended guidelines for health and safety and PPE and all of those important things, but they wouldn't necessarily be liable for someone contracting the illness.
So I referred to this as COVID-19 tort reform.
Yeah.
Because candidly, the legislature has the ability and should step in, as you suggested, and say, if you're doing these safety protocols, however they formulate that, whether it's using national standards from CDC or whatever, if you're doing these safety protocols, well, then you should have a certain amount of liability shielding.
Right.
The biggest issue I keep harping on is causation. You're going to have an issue showing how you caught or contracted the virus I think it was a lot easier to make that determination earlier. Now it may be, and again, I'm not a physician of infectious diseases. Shout out to Tatiana from the Baton Rouge Clinic. I'm not that, but causation is going to be the big issue. So I think those are valid. I think those are valid concerns. I've told clients, I said, look, there's no reason from the legal standpoint. I know you want to meet in person, but candidly, until I can feel better about either one, not getting somebody sick, or two, not getting sick myself, we're going to use Zoom. We're going to just keep using Zoom. So, Eric Troutman, Eric Troutman just happens to be my insurance agent. He writes, since there is a bit of tail between when the virus is contracted and when symptoms present, how can it be determined where one contracted the virus? Eric, you just literally harped on what I was saying.
Hit the nail on the head.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the big issue. But Eric, the bigger issue is if the legislature puts in COVID-19 tort reform, the immunities are they're more preventative in plaintiffs, and I'm not coming down on plaintiffs' attorneys. This is not what I'm doing. Franz Borghardt is not coming down on plaintiffs' attorneys. It would provide a layer of insulation that essentially, when evaluating whether or not to take a case and present a case and candidly sue over a case, it would provide the insurance company for the business some guidance, and certainly more importantly, it would provide plaintiffs' attorneys some guidance. I know there's a stigma about plaintiffs' attorneys out there, but I will tell you, most of the smaller law firms like my own, when we evaluate taking cases from a civil standpoint, we don't want to make bad investments. And if it's not a good sound, if you have tort liability shielding as a business, if you have immunity, we're not going to, most good lawyers, Liz, will not needlessly sue. So good question, Eric. Spot on. Let's see if there's any other ones before we move on. I'm trying, and by the way, I'm trying to track that legislation as best as I can. I know you're not the legislative go-to lady for BRAC, but
I am.
Oh, you are. That's right. How fortunate that we have you, Liz, and not Adam. So last night, after the governor extended the order, I was, of course, reading rumbles on social media. It's my understanding that the legislative session will kick off May.
We're hearing that they're gonna come back sometime next week to start talking, but I don't know whether they'll actually kind of gavel back in next week or if it might be the week after that. It's coming though.
Yeah. So the hot issue on that front, and I talked to the East Ascension Rotary Club about this morning. So just so everybody's on the same page, I was asked to be a guest speaker at the Rotary Club in East Ascension, and I asked the individual who invited me. I said, "Well, what do you guys want to talk about? Do y'all want to talk about law? Do you want to talk about Geaux Rouge? What do you want to talk about?" And they said, "Whatever you want." And I said, "That's really, don't give me, letting the horse just run in the field is a horrible thing for me." So candidly, what happened was I talked about media commentary and being a legal commentator and talking about Geaux Rouge, and then people started asking questions. And one of the questions that we got asked, and what I was asked to expound on, was the governor's executive authority to do what he is doing. And I said, what a lot of people don't realize when they start pounding their chest and screaming separation of powers is that the legislature empowered the governor, delegated authority through some post-Katrina legislation to do everything he's doing. Whether or not it's constitutional or not, we can quabble about that later. So candidly, the only way the legislature could retract that authority is to quote unquote be in session. Now, I'm not suggesting that's what they're going to do, Liz. I'm not suggesting they should do it. I'm not suggesting it's right or not. But that every time we talk about the legislature, I try to, and with the governor's order, I try to remind people that there is a legal basis for what he's doing, both constitutionally and in the Louisiana legislature. That all being said, I've got about 2 minutes left with Liz. She's got a meeting at 2:30. So Liz, anything else we need to talk about before we skedaddle and let you back to your very important and busy day?
I think that we have covered it. We are really excited to be looking forward to opening up this economy. We've been working really hard to put together what we're calling our Safe at Work framework. That is available on our website. We would welcome folks to come and look that over and provide feedback to us on that framework. We want to be ready when the governor gives the go ahead for folks to start getting back to work. We want to be ready to do that safely and as efficiently as possible. And so we're looking for the business community and the community at large to help us figure out what that looks like.
So as always, we appreciate Liz and the family of BRAC individuals who spend time with us every Tuesday for coming on the Geaux Rouge, social media, Facebook Live. If you're not watching on Facebook Live, or if you missed part of this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload it on YouTube, and then I'm going to upload it to www.geauxrouge.com. You've been listening to the sweet sounds of Liz Smith from BRAC, as well as Franz Borghardt from Geaux Rouge. You guys have a great day, and stay tuned for more information next week from BRAC.
Thanks, Franz.